As I figured, probably most of you have seen some dovetail demos online just to get a little primer, which is great. I was watching them too because I had really forgotten there is a particular method on how to lay out the angles of the dovetails. But for the most part, I would say 80% of them say just use your eyeball and use your best judgment. There are a couple of things you do mechanically want to be aware of. Mark had a question of, you know, why some of these guys make really, really thin pins. And structurally, since everything's really combined and locked in, I don't think pins, them being so thin, is a mechanical kind of negative, even though if you are using something like drawers, something like on a moving actually box, you probably want to thicken those pins up a little bit just because it does have a lot of push and pull. But if it's just a regular kind of static box, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And for the most part, people do that to really show off. And this is true. I think they do it to show off, you know, how thin and how precise they can get those tails and things. So anyway, I think what I'll be doing is showing you mostly, I'm going to do the layouts on these bigger pieces of pine here. And if anybody came by, I think I set out 8 sets and 6 got picked up, which are great. So you guys can, I don't expect you guys to follow along with me at all because I go really fast. I literally have an hour and I have to take off here, but we should be able to get them done. I've been practicing for a bit. But if you guys do have any questions, you know, please, you know, chime in right on the chat board, and Kobe will relay things to me. But the first thing is you know, when you're cutting boards, preferably, do they need to be flat? Yeah. If you're practicing dovetails, do they have to be perfectly flat and square? That's my wife, Jill. She's the photographer or videologist today. We're not video recording.
Videographer.
What are we doing? Yeah, we're video something. Anyway, we're zooming. First thing you want to do, or the first tool you should probably pick up more than anything, if you don't already have it, combination square. I think I mentioned that. Minimum sliding 6-inch square. It's really useful, and you're going to see me, and I'll try to remember to illustrate. This thing is like the most useful tool on earth. You can slide it, measure things, mark things out really well. You know, and there is a technique to a balancing act of this thing, and I'll try to once again demonstrate it. Big ones like 12 inches are kind of clumsy, and it's good for you if you're doing more carpenter work, or if you're doing a finer work, like this is a good size. Has a perfect 45, perfect 90 degree. They're made in ATOL mass, so keep our economy going. But anyway, what I'm going to do right now is just check and make sure, let's flip it. Everything is really square, because dovetails are one of those things, if you start really square,
I hit the wrong button.
Help you out, flat and square. What was that?
I hit the wrong button. You're going to have to hit start on the video again. On that. My fault.
Jill's got it.
Thanks, Jill.
Now, is this the right one?
Yep.
So flat, you can check it that way, flat. And all I'm looking for is light behind it. This isn't such a big deal. So yeah, there we go, flat and square. So now another question is always, what do I lay out first, tails or pins? I lay out pins 80% of the time, unless I'm doing blind dovetails, which I'll show you guys at the end, I hope, if we have enough time. But most of the time I'll lay out pins just because I can mark them much easier when I need to cut the tails. But you can do them either way. I've done them both ways. At this point, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just trying to hit the highlights of cutting dovetails, which makes the process a lot less painful. At the beginning, it's just gonna be painful. I can't even, not even gonna lie to you guys. But as you get more practice, you know, it does get easier. Sharp tools are a definite must. A good dovetail saw, if you can get one, even though I'm going to be using a couple of different ones I found around the shop. So yeah, start from there. And all right, so as far as dovetails go, that up. Are there any questions? I don't have time. No? Okay, good. I'll keep going. How about the front camera?
It's still there.
Oh, okay. So what I've got here, well, let me go to the side camera because I think that's more. What I've got here is kind of the general dovetails.
Still not seeing the side camera.
It's switched, Mark. It
Yeah.
should be there. Anybody else?
I can see both cameras.
Okay.
Okay. So what I've got laid out here are two general angles of dovetail, and they don't really, most of the people don't use like an angle, numbered angle. They'll use anywhere, they're called 1/4s, 1/5s, 1/6, 1/7s, or 1/8s. And it's basically 1 to 4 on a metric scale or an inches scale there. And you're just using your ruler to lay it out. But anyway, basically what it comes down to, if you're having something mechanical, the less angle you want here, because basically, this is a better illustration here, is when you get up into this area right here, you're really starting to get into these short graining, and these areas right here become super weak. So that kind of angle, probably 15-degree angle, isn't great. More like a 5 to 8 degree angle. I'll just use angles.
You're talking about a ratio between length and height, right?
Correct, exactly. So, but a lot of times also, it's like whatever looks good to you. And once you say, I'm only using these 3-inch pieces, if you're using a really wide board, like a 12-inch board, and you want to lay out dovetails, a different angle may look better to you. And I would say use as few, you know, say a 12-inch board, 12 dovetails are perfect, or excuse me, 7 dovetails are perfectly good. You can do 12, but you're just asking for a lot of more work than you need mechanically. Does that make sense? I always go with whatever you can get away with mechanically where it's not gonna, you know, kind of compromise what you're doing. Like I said, it really only makes a difference when you're making drawers or something that's moving. You're pulling in and out. Okay? All right, so just very quickly.
There's a question that just came in.
Oh, yeah, question.
Vadim wants to know about the is there a good rule of thumb for joint density? Like how many dovetails to put per?
Oh, okay, so I've got a 3-inch wide board. I'm basically putting two dovetails and 3 pins in here. That's all I'm doing, okay? And that's gonna be perfectly fine for like a really low drawer. If it was a 6-inch drawer, I'd probably only add 1 more dovetail and maybe widen them out and then also make the pins wider. Does that make sense? But that's just me. That's just personal taste. I don't want to cut. If I've got to make 6 sets of drawers, that's 24 sides that I have to do. I'm not going to cut, you know, I'm not laying out a ton of dovetails just to get them mechanically working.
For that, could you get away with 1 or 2 pins?
For a real wide drawer?
No, for the piece you're holding.
Yeah, that's all I'm doing. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
This is, I've already, well, let me get to that. I have a method of laying this out, so I should show you. That's what I'm going to show you guys next. So this is a 3-inch piece of, or a 3-inch wide piece of wood. I am going to take this apart. And by the way, if this is brand new to you, these combination squares, you might need some practice taking them apart and putting them back together. This seems to be one of those Rubik's cubes for some people who can't get it back together. Anyway,
Do it in the shop. If you can't get it back, bring it to one of us. Don't just put it back in the damn drawer.
yeah, don't shove it together. You'll bend the pin, and then some of these squares are hard to get pins anymore. But
And
okay,
and
so,
sometimes the blade is matched to the square, and if they mix them up, they don't work well.
yes, that also. Mark knows he does it every time. Anyway, so if I've got a 3-inch piece and I want to lay out 3 pins, 2 dovetails, I got to figure out, and I want to have it somewhat symmetrical. Most of the time, if you find the center, you can kind of eyeball the rest. If you're not comfortable with doing that, what you can do is blade out I'm just going to use 4 inches here. And then what I'm going to do is mark right on the inches 1, 2, 3. And that should be perfectly symmetrical. So now I can take this and just run it right to the end. Over, run it up, center line. And by the way, I'm using pen. I would usually use pencil, but just for you guys so you can see it a little better, just like something like that. Super simple, okay? So now I knew at least where the center is and where the center of my dovetails are gonna sit. Does that make sense? Now, since I'm gonna have 2 dovetails and a center pin, I'm going to start with my center pin and just equal sides on the foot, on the smaller part, lay this out. Oh, I've kind of pre-angled this already. Flip it over. There's my pin. Can you guys see that?
Oh, hold on.
Okay, so we're there. Now I've got that. Now, how I'm gonna figure out my edges, or excuse me, on the sides, I don't want a full pin. Obviously, I'm not gonna get a full pin. So I'm gonna take what I have, this distance, and half it. Once again, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. You guys are engineers, you should be good at this, eyeballing things. Just takes practice. Trust yourself. By the way, these are all just practice. Oops, I messed up. These are all just practice, keep that in mind. You're gonna end up just, cutting the set, cutting away, and doing it over. Doing it again and again and again. All right, so it's a little off. It's way off, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. As long as I have a matching side, that will work.
Let's see what you mean by asymmetrical.
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by not matching? Can you show the other?
Oh, it's not symmetrical. Like
camera?
this one is bigger than this one.
Switch cameras. Other camera.
I eyeballed something wrong. Oh, that's what I did wrong. My center's off, so that's what's wrong.
Okay.
All right, so next thing I want to find is how deep do I want to cut these tails? Simply enough, I can take the corresponding side and just, by the way, it's always good to use a relatively flat table and make sure you clean off all the gunk and glue that people before have left for you, unless it's your own table, and then it's always clean. So I'll draw a little line there, and that's it. That's my depth. Put this guy back together, and I'm just going to double check. Ooh, that looks good though. So I just drew a square line right over it, and it worked. Now your next thing is just to make sure or double check that this thing is square. You're going to match up all these lines. And if everything's good, everything should match up perfectly. Yep, pretty good. So that's good. All right. Next thing, I'm just gonna, now that I have my pins in line, I'm gonna draw straight lines down.
There's a question.
Can you read it? Or-
Charlotte asked a question.
Yep.
Are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, Charlotte, you can just ask your
You
question.
can just yell it out.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how did you set the angle for the top of your dovetails?
So I have a tough time explaining it, and honestly, there's one person who uses, and it's an old system I used to use, but it's hard for me to show you on my. It's really hard to see because you have to use a ruler to do it. But it's called a 1-4, 1-5, 1-6, 1-7, 1-8 method. And basically, you're using kind of these pre-existing hash marks and going 1 and then over 1, which is actually a quarter to get a quarter angle and things like that. But like I said, it's better to watch this guy on YouTube. He explains it way better. I was trying to do it, but he uses metric. And I think 1 through 10 is easier to divide up than this thing.
But
Makes sense? So it's literally like, he's using a centimeter. So it's like 1 to 2 centimeters, and that's an angle. 1 to 3 centimeters, and that's an angle. So that's how he's using it. But I didn't quite get like the 1-4, 1-5, 1-6. I just didn't understand it. So,
the thing you can do is choose.
but basically, what I was telling people before is like, look at it, draw a couple out, see what you like, and then set that angle. By the way, this is I forgot to mention this. This is called a bevel square, and this is kind of, you can angle this in any direction. We have these in the shop. These are kind of the high school version that don't work. Oh, that works. They're kind of plasticky. I like this one because it's because I've had it forever, so I like it best. And combination square I've gone over, and the next thing I'm going to go over is marking gauge. So basically, if you can see, I've laid out all these lines. They're just vertical lines, 90-degree lines from the top. That's all they are. I've already laid out a really nice set, so I'm going to use this one. This one's way more symmetrical. See that one? That's symmetrical. And before I show you that, so I mentioned I'm going to cut the pins first. So now everything's laid out. So you're getting a sense of what the dovetails are going to look like and what the pins are going to look like. At this point, definitely take a marker pen and mark out the things you're going to cut out and chop out. And these are going to be the tails I'm cutting
This is
out.
a mistake I've made.
Because you will, if you don't mark them, you're going to cut the wrong thing, guaranteed.
Can you
Mark-
zoom in and show us what you marked? Just so.
Oh, sure. Both cameras are on permanently?
Well, no, I switched it over. You're good.
So I marked So here are the tails, and I'm going to be cutting those out and chopping those out. And these are the pins right here that I'm going to leave, okay? And then I've made these vertical lines right here. So, and that's what I'm going to eventually going to be cutting with the saw. So the next thing I'm going to do right here, with this marking gauge, basically it's a flat stock with a sharp razor, an edge. It is pretty sharp, and it will cut you if you're not careful. And this, super simple, a bar. It's set on a bar with a little thumb screw, and you can adjust it right to your line. And you're going to want to, once you got it to the line, make a cut right on this line. Because what you're basically doing is cutting these fibers for two reasons. When you cut with a saw, you're going to get less flaking out or tear out of the wood. But also, when you start chiseling, you're going to be able to put that chisel edge right in that little groove and have a super precise edge. Make sense?
Do you want to do it for the whole way around or just the sections that you're removing?
Great question. So I only do it for the flat face for right now because I'm keeping this. Some people go all the way around, you know, but I'm not going to cut any of these side pins yet. It's the next step when I do the other side. I'll cut that and I'll most likely mark this as well. Okay. Yeah. All right.
One thing I've seen done is that people will cut it all the way across the inside, but on the outside only mark in the waist regions so that they don't get a line in the part of the outside they're keeping.
Yeah, you can do that. It's up to you. You can also use a knife. I use this knife sometimes and just a straight edge. So you can do that. I'm just kind of doing it for speed right now more than anything. But this is a marking knife. It's got two edges and you can use it on either side. And once again, super precise. I think I wrote it in your note in the notes. X-Acto blade is perfectly fine as well. But it's just the thing about the marking gauge. Once you have it set, boom, 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 you're doing all your sets, and it's set, and you don't have to like get this out, reset it, because you're constantly moving this thing around. So it's never set for the right or the exact gauge. Where this thing will be set, and you set it, forget it. 20 minutes later, everything's cooked. You got a set of dovetails. Maybe 10 minutes.
Hey, Hayami, a quick question.
What?
When you set the depth of that marking gauge to cut the scribe line, do you set it to exactly the width of the piece of wood that you're cutting to, or do you leave it a little bit proud to leave some tails that you can chisel or plane off?
Great question. So yeah, I set it right exactly to the edge. And what Carl is mentioning, some people leave, that's too much, mark a little lower on your piece of wood. So what that does is it allows you to have a little, it's called being proud at the top, where you'll take a plane and take it down afterwards. So I don't do that just because I think it's just one extra step that, I don't really need to do. But if you feel, I think I used to do it. I tried it a couple times, but it didn't, I'm kind of all about just practice until you can get this down and save enough time. But if you want to work that way, that's fine.
It's a thing to do if you're worried about cutting your pins too short.
Exactly. So, which I'm not. All right. Other questions before I start cutting? Okay. So I've got this nice vise here. It's tough to do. You can clamp things vertical if you have a solid vertical piece to something else. If you don't have a clamp, if you're using a Japanese saw, you can clamp it to the edge of the table, because basically Japanese saws, it doesn't matter if you're cutting down, sideways, upside down. I'm just going to use the vise, but if I'm going to show you, I'm going to try cutting with the Western saw. It's really hard to cut downwards with a Western saw. And when you are cutting with this, and if you are using a wood vise like this, you want to get this piece of wood as close as you can to the clamp to reduce vibration, but you also don't want it too low, which is too low right now, where you're going to cut into the clamp right there. My clamp at home, my wooden clamp, has tons of cut marks because I don't really care, but I won't do it to these benches. So the method is with these things. So I think I had the challenge, Kobe challenged me to cut with like this $1.50 X-Acto knife saw that you get with the kit, which is 15 bucks. But basically it's a model maker saw. And I'm just gonna demonstrate with it a little bit because it might be easier for you guys to see. But when I start cutting, I'm actually going to choose a side of the line that I'm gonna cut on. And mostly I'm cutting on the inside of whatever I'm wasting away, I'm cutting to that side on that line. Because if I make a bad cut, I'm usually cutting into the waste and I can come back with a chisel and pare it down. Guys who are really good with saws never have to use chisels. I almost have to use chisels to clean everything up afterwards. But basically the method is you can take a finger or take your thumb and put it on the side of your saw and take little strokes. Most of your Western saws will have finer teeth at the tip, so you can get that first nice purchase. Make
Those have two different edges of it.
you get a deeper cut. I'm starting on the front and then rocking back till I get to the back part. And then once I get a really nice edge in there, I can take some bigger wax and use the whole blade. I'm gonna stop right there. So I might not have explained it. I probably didn't explain this at all, but any kind of dovetail or joinery saw is gonna have this backing to it, like that, Japanese saw, dovetail, Western dovetail saw. But this blade is so thin, it's starting to drift. So I'm gonna switch over, but it does cut. So if I wasn't doing such a deep cut, I could probably get away with this. Like if I was using 1/4-inch stock to make a box. But
So, and
yep.
along those lines, next week's class of on Kumiko, that saw will be perfectly fine.
Oh yeah.
Because you're cutting only 1/8 by 3/8 inch stock. So that's, yeah. It's not great for this, but it would be totally acceptable for next week.
It does work. Like if I was in prison and that's what they gave me, that's what I'd use. That's what I'd use anyway.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so this thing is awesome. I've only used it a couple times. I think this is actually maybe the first time I've used it, to be honest. This is kind of dumb. The screw fell out, but I'm kind of manhandling it to get it to cut. But this is really nice, super straight. Once I get to the line, I'm gonna kind of slow up, look to the other side, hope I cut the other side straight, and there you go. Japanese saw, just the opposite. It's cutting on the pull stroke, and the finer teeth on this one, yeah, are on the heel as opposed to the nose. So the nice thing about the Japanese saws, the blades are a little thinner, generally, except that one's pretty thin. And they're just, I think for a lot of people, they're just so much sharper and easier to handle because, I mean, I'm putting no pressure on this thing. It's just cutting itself. So it's also, I'm very comfortable with using these saws. So I don't know, whatever you guys prefer.
Question, Hayami.
Yeah,
So the teeth pattern on that dovetail saw is the same teeth pattern that's on one of the edges for a Ryoba saw, right?
no. So the dovetail saws have a combination. That's a great question. So the Ryoba saws have a blade that's meant for cutting right down the fibers, and then the other side cuts across, where this kind of does both, has a split between the two. So it's kind of, the teeth are set somewhere in between. And they're still super fine. And there are a lot more teeth, it seems like, on this particular saw.
And the other important distinction is that it has the spine on this one to keep it really straight.
Yes.
Ryoba does not.
Huge difference. So if you had to use a Ryoba saw, which you can, and I've done, it's much easier if you cut in this direction, straight down, instead of using something like this. Way easier. And it's just mainly because of how the blade is designed. You know, it's on a pull stroke, so you're creating tension in that blade, and it's straightening itself out. Almost cut my hand. Anyway, let me get back to this. I'm doing it okay. It's also probably good to have a light, a closer light source, so you can see. I've been getting a lot of shadows here. I can't see crap. So I'm off on one edge. Got to probably clean that up, but that's okay. Off on two edges, but not critical because we can always clean it up at this point.
Show the side camera.
Was that?
Show it to the side camera.
Oh, this is
Other one.
this is the side. You can see I'm off. So
But you're
I
off.
didn't do it, but I should have done it because I'm out of practice, is actually flip it around and cut the other side. That way I would have been able to see. But anyway, I know I can clean it up, and I'm just sure to clean it up anyway, so that's what I'm gonna do. All right, so now I'm gonna go on the table, take kind of the scrap piece of wood. Now you can take a really nice piece of wood, end grain, cut off, and put it right up to your line here, and use it kind of as a guide to when you're cutting this. You definitely want to have this wherever you're cutting on the solid part of the table and not off the side of the table. Okay, because you can really, this thing slips, boy, do some damage. And also probably another thing I do is probably put a block of wood behind this, like screw or nail a piece of wood behind there, but I'm not going to do that. All right. I sharpen up these nice Lee Nielsen dovetail chisels. 29, no, they're 70 bucks. Never mind, they're not 29. At Lee Nielsen. And they're, first time I've used them today, I don't have a set of dovetail chisels, and I recommend these. As you can see, these profiles are cut so you can actually get those edges into the tight corners of a dovetail if need be. I'm just going to start whacking away.
You want me to move this so that
Yeah,
it's on that side?
Yeah, or right here. You might want to just move.
It's best if it's not on the bench because it was vibrating a bunch.
Oh, yeah, Jill's going to hold it now.
Oh, perfect.
Is this good?
Is it good? Can you guys see?
Oh, weird.
So I'm only going to cut halfway through here. I'm going to flip it because I don't want to blow out the end or other side because it's softwood. I'd probably do the same thing with hardwood. Woo. Wait.
Hayami, if you were doing half blind dovetails instead of through dovetails, is that what you would do? Is you just stop halfway?
You kind of have to. I've got a set up, so we have. I think we'll have a little time so I can show you guys how to do it. But I think if I just show you the setup, you go, oh, that's how you do it. But I've already cut one side of the half blind, so there is half blinds are nicer in a way because you can cheat a little more or make not so much cheat. You can make more mistakes, and you're not going to see them. So, if you look at this, these pins are kind of real shaggy, shoddy. So, but I can clean these up, and like I said, I kind of am better with chisel than I am with a saw. So I'm just gonna come in here, clean these up sideways. And if you have really sharp chisels, it makes really quick and easy work. And go sideways there. One thing I'm going to show you. What?
Sorry for my angles here. I'm kind of blind, so I can't even see what I'm filming.
It looks pretty good. Oh, there we go.
So there's one that's really bad. And I'm gonna show you guys this, but I'm gonna warn you, really look at my hands so you don't slip and cut yourself. Now also I wouldn't recommend doing this until you build up a little hand strength. I'm actually not putting a lot of tension on here, but basically I'm gonna hold this like this and just kind of whittle it away, just like this. And why this is why this is safe is you've got this big piece of wood, and as long as this thing's sharp, you're not trying to push it, and you slide and do something like that in your hand, then that would be bad.
And also, you're not holding on the handle of the chisel. You're holding the.
Very true. I'm not torquing it out like this. I'm really got a lot of control here. So it's kind of like whittling. It's kind of like, you guys saw Kobe's class. A lot of this is just really close, high control, not holding it on the handle, but on the chisel body. The one thing I do need to warn you, these edges are really sharp still. So you don't want to slip and kind of on that edge as well. I've done it so many times.
But if they're your chisels, you can file it off and it's fine.
I'm not filing it off.
But if
You can, yes.
own them,
Oh, actually, what you could do is just take it on the stone and rub it on the edge.
Yeah.
That won't hurt it. That'd be fine. Probably a good idea. All right, so there we go. How's that looking? I feel fairly confident about that. Fairly. All right, so this next step is you really, really want to do something like this, is look at your dovetails. Have your wide part of the dovetail looking up, and then match your piece of wood to it that way. so many times, it's so easy to flip it the other way and have it become this not so engineered correct dovetail. So make sure you align this correctly, and now you can mark the other side. Oh, actually I don't have to do that because I have my marking gauge set, right? I think I changed it. No, it's set. So now I can mark, and this is where I'm going to mark this thing all the way around. So one thing that came to mind is when you have this mark and it's going all the way across and on the sides, most carpenters or most furniture makers will leave that because it basically is telling somebody this is a handmade dovetail. And that thing is just part of the aesthetic of the drawer. That's what somebody told me, you know, believe it or not. I almost flipped it wrong. So, all right, I'm gonna double check. That looks good. Now I can come in with a pencil. You can try it with a X-Acto or a knife. If you have hardwood, it's easier with a knife. My knife here just digs into this wood, so it's not great. There, so I've laid that out. That looks pretty good, pretty straight, amazing. Well, I've changed that angle, so I have to rely on this. I'm just kind of double checking these things. All right. Okay, so now they have this. I'm just gonna mark this, and this is my cutout area. These are the pins I'm gonna cut away, okay? I'm gonna come in with my combination square. Mark these lines. All right. Let's see. Oh, I'm just gonna go for it from the front. It's good to me. Oh, let's mark this too. So now I'm gonna have to use my smaller chisels, but these tend to be a little quicker, mainly because I can use a saw to cut out this and also that part. Boom, boom. Okay. This I'll have to cut the edges and then use a chisel to waste it away. All right. So now, what I'm gonna do here is, since I'm gonna be sawing these, I don't like sawing at an angle, so I'm gonna move this to 90 degrees, these lines, clamp it that way. And then same kind of idea is you'll start flip it. Went a little over, but that's okay. That'll go on the inside of the box. All right. Wood. But you know what? I should have done this for efficiency. Now I can just take this, clamp it. Kind of tough to see. You good so far? Now, same idea. Chop these out. Make sure it's clamped in there all right.
So
Just kinda-
this is why dovetail saws have those sharp angles, right?
yes.
Or dovetail chisels, rather.
You mean the chisel?
Yeah, it has this is why it has the shape. Right.
They are pretty nice. Nicer what I haven't used before. And you can make your, much sharper angles than this. A little bit more, not much more. So this is the reason why you don't want to make, I think, too narrow of a pin if you're using a chisel method. Now, I know there's probably going to be a question. There are people who use a fret saw to take out these things, and that's perfectly good. I think if you're doing really thin pins, that's up to you guys. I've never used that method. I don't particularly have a reason why I haven't. I just, it's just one extra tool I'd rather not deal with or have or buy. I've seen people use table saws, band saws to cut dovetails, whatever you guys want to set up. But, if you're stuck in a pandemic and then the power goes out, you can always cut these things.
In the daytime, not at night.
No, you do it at night. It's just all feel.
Yeah.
Then you can't see your mistakes.
There you go. Your fingers anymore.
Okay. So I don't know how lucky I feel. So usually if you're off center, no, it's this way. So that's the other thing. Mark your outsides. There is an inside, there is an outside. So it's close. And usually with fir and pine and softer woods, you can press them together and see where things aren't. Oops, no, wrong way. Things are too big. You can always mark one of these sides with a pencil, and then also use that with hardwoods. Ooh, close.
Is the idea that the pencil gets scuffed away where it's binding?
It will trace to the other side. I think that's the idea.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Yep.
That's a bad habit, by the way. Put the chisel down before you adjust your glasses. So I think I'm a little fat here and a little fat here. Let me try to say.
Just a time check, Hayami. We have 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Oh, that's great. Perfect. I can just show you the blind dovetails. Oh, close. And, oh, yeah. So I'm close. That's not so great, but it's close. Oh, I dropped that one. Oh, that looks better now that I pushed it together. This is my first one was better.
Well done.
So, yeah, I could clean it up a little bit and see all this stuff on the bottom. Back to Carl's question, if I were to make this proud, I could kind of fudge around with this a little better. So the other thing is, to get rid of this kind of stuff, don't throw these away and sweep them up and throw them away. You can always make them into wedges and push them in there, and no one's never going to know. Like, you can fill that stuff in. What you want to be careful of is not to kind of push this in too prematurely, because you'll start to split these areas right here, and then it starts to get messy. It's more disheartening than anything else.
That's a real woodworker's tip, by the way, the wedges, because the YouTube folks aren't going to tell you that. They're going to say that they're perfect, but everybody does that shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Hayami's honest about it, at least.
I'll be back in 1 second.
I've also seen the trick of just rubbing sawdust over the glue joint.
Yeah, the chips work so much better, though.
Nah, sawdust is bullshit. It's just lazy. You should be able to just take that wood and stick it in there. I don't think, and it finishes better when you put actual wedge pieces of wood. That's why. If you ever put in filler or glue and sand or epoxy and sand, it shows up like anything. Like, it's not, you're not, so is that one on?
Yeah, that one.
So I brought this out because this is the very first dovetail box I ever made. You can see the lines. See, it's pretty cool. Except the dovetails are kind of too steep, but that's okay.
And what's the little figure inside there made out of?
So this used to have a bigger part to it, and it was like this little figure inside my head. Like, this was my head, and there was a body to it, blah, blah, blah. But the other part was kind of cheap and falling apart. But this I kept. I made this in 1989, before most of you guys were born. And it's lasted all these years. All right, before we go away, I got 5 minutes. Okay, so blind dovetails. Any questions on those dovetails, by the way? Okay, good. So blind dovetails. Basically, the difference is, oh, here we go. I laid this out. What we're doing here is, usually when you're using blind dovetails, I've got this in reverse, where if I had a thicker piece, this would be my fancier, let's say I'm making a set of drawers. This is where it really comes in handy. This thicker piece with base plate, and the thinner pieces of wood on the sides would be the sides. And so you can see the difference here. And the half blind literally is only going up 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the piece of the face plate. So you still have your strength here, but you're not interfering with this nice piece of wood. Usually this is a fancier piece of wood. Generally, I tell people don't use hardwoods, don't use fancy pieces of woods if you're doing a dovetail project, because it's just such a pain to cut with chisels and with the saws. You drive yourself nuts, but to each his own. Excuse me. So how we're going to do this? I've already cut this, and if you notice this, there is a little tiny lip that I've cut, a rabbit, and that's just so it's a little cleaner when you put things together like this. So it hides a lot of your potential mistakes. And also, when you're insetting it like this, you can hide some mistakes as well. It's a little trickier to cut, and you're doing a little more chisel work because you're not cutting all the way through on the tails or the pins part. But let me see if I can do this. But it's basically the same method, is coming in here, just cutting partly. Set for that. This is what it's a little tricky, because you're not relying on the saw marks anymore. You have to kind of get in here. This is where it gets a little tough. Tiny little cuts, even use some pairing methods. So now at this point, instead of using a hammer, I'll just come in, kind of press down, press in, clean this up. Ooh, that's not bad. I can go over a few minutes, but hopefully my dog won't get pissed. We're open until 7, right? Almost there. And these are, wow, these are way quicker. But it's quicker because I laid them out. Wow, these chisels are really nice. Close. If I pair right on these lines, I've got it. I overdid it.
Trying to go too fast.
Yeah, I went too fast. Too far. Well, something like that. But like I said, it's supposed to be opposite. This is the hardwood you should use as a face, and this is much easier to fit on the side. So, but that's what I had. I think this was somebody's in cutting board or something. Questions?
Quick question. I know we don't use glue in joinery, but how tight do you want those joints to be dry? Like, do you want it to be kind of knocked together?
Pretty snug. I mean, you would use glue. You still have
Definitely be glued.
four areas that'll glue up really nicely. I mean, the end grain here and on the face won't glue up, but here, these are really solid glue joints. Only people don't really use glue are like timber frame carpenters, but they'll use pins. Oh, sorry. Anything else? Questions?